kind of depends on the environment of the group and the group leader, to be honest. So I hear both sides of that some people feel like because you're not in person, that's not really their style of connecting. And so they're kind of feel limited in what they share out. And then on the other hand, you're at home, you're probably in comfortable clothing and you're, relaxing and you're a bit more ready to kind of talk and dig in. And so some people feel more comfortable. I think that can be leveraged if you have the right facilitator in place. And if you have someone who's willing to make sure everyone is seen and heard, as Thom mentioned, having super large groups where you're flipping through pages of people, you're going to miss a lot of that personal interaction that you can pick up on the screen. And so I think what we have seen mostly, the feedback that I've received, is that people do feel a bit more comfortable because we had, I don't know if everybody's church is laid out the same, but you have those classrooms sometimes that share a wall, and then there's like a divider wall and you can kind of hear what they're talking about, but not really enough to make it out, that kind of thing. So you do have some people who feel like it's a safer space to share some of the things they wouldn't want to talk about in church. But I think a lot of that can be cultivated with a skilled facilitator who can just make sure that the conversation keeps going and that asks the right questions and encourages people to participate. I think that happens when you have someone who won't leave one box unengaged with on the screen, and calls people by name. And, some of the things we encourage is making sure your name is on the bottom of your screen and making sure that your video is on. I think someone mentioned in the chat, it was disruptive a time or two when there were background contributors, but then also someone was just a box with letters. And so it felt like you weren't really able to engage and connect. And I think it's fine to encourage some norms around how you're going to operate on Zoom, whether that means we'll keep our video on unless you absolutely need a break, that we will share openly and honestly, and that we want everyone to participate in the conversation. So I think it can go different ways, but I think we can do things intentionally to make it a more inviting environment.
I love that you put a positive look on that. That sometimes, honestly, I mean, there's a good side to the rawness and the transparency and the openness, along with maybe some of the ugly, opinionated sides of it too. And so you saw the opportunity in it, just that coaching. That's good. Thom, within BSF Online, are you seeing any of this, and how are you dealing with that?
Well, we're just starting up right now, and so I can't speak to, since like we ended at the beginning of May, I can't speak to more recent things, but I very much anticipate seeing some of this. And, we train our leaders to try to keep the discussion on track and focused on the word and that we're going through, But on the other hand, these things going on in our country and our world, they're real life. And people are going to bring these things up. And if we can't talk about them, in the context of the Bible that we're studying, kind of what's the point? We have to be able to do that. But it's so important that it's done respectfully, that we hear one another out, that we look at it from God's perspective as we do so. And the trained leaders, it's their responsibility to facilitate that and encourage that and make that happen in that way. And I do anticipate it because, especially in online, because, we had a lot of skeptics about online saying, you're not really going to have such engagement here, typically. You can't really get very deep. And I can't tell you how many people entered BSF Online with that thinking and have come back to it and said, wow, this is deeper and richer than I ever experienced in person. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One, at the more superficial level, is when we see a picture of one another in our environments, it raises questions. Maybe a family member comes in, or a kid, and you ask a question about them, or just something there. It invites some others into your life, and you see a picture of them that you wouldn't see in a church room, right? A room at the church. It helps connect people. The other aspect is that oftentimes, at least in BSF Online, you're connecting with people who don't live near you. And so these are not people you're going to see at church or at work or at the corner store. And you know how that adage of how people often open up more to strangers than the people they know. I think that's a contributing factor why we've seen people engage more deeply, more quickly. They feel kind of safer as a result. and consequently, we have richer discussions right from the start.
Strikes me, Thom, that some of the people that are viewing right now, that are participating in the chat, don't feel comfortable within their own congregations, maybe being open and raw. So you might get a few BSF online people scattered about from just this conversation today going, that sounds pretty good. I'd like to be a place where I could really throw some thoughts around and nobody would, I wouldn't bump into anybody at Target. So Bill, you're going to get the last word on this question. Love, how do you coach your people through, let's specifically drill into, it's an election year and people are going to spout opinions and opinions held strongly. So how do you coach your leaders through engaging that real stuff of life?
Well, you bring up the $1 million question, because in our context, and I love it, we have campuses that are in the city and we have campuses that are far out in the suburbs. And so you have campuses located in strongly blue areas, and you have campuses held in strongly red areas. And quite frankly, we love that diversity, because we think that actually allows us to speak to the preeminent values that we as followers of Jesus have versus the pluralistic values of living in our culture and being able to participate in a political system, which we should do. But there is a platinum rule that supersedes every other rule, right? And it's how we treat one another. It's how we interface with one another. The evidence of loving God is how we love one another. So we talk a lot about around here, what does love require of us? And much of that is moving to becoming more curious, asking more questions, and engaging people around story, so there can be growth that occurs on both sides of the picture. So whether it is, we have racial reconciliation groups that are going on right now, and great conversations and some great learning. Be the Bridge has been a book that has been so helpful for so many. And those are just important contexts. You mentioned the political thing. Andy did a message back in January to say, okay, it's an election year, get ready, but let's show doing it a different way.
I think that's one of Andy's most popular YouTube videos right now. I think I've had it forwarded to me a time or two. That was a good one.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's okay that people have passions and, believe in certain policy, that's fine. But at the end of the day, all this is going to burn up. Yeah. And one day, what will be left will be people and the story that we were able to tell along the way. And I hope it's a good story. And it depends on if we will take that place, what I think is a humble posture of leaning in rather than crossing our arms and distancing ourselves from one another. And, I think from an online standpoint, what we're doing digitally really does allow us to engage in unique ways that we normally wouldn't. And I have found when it comes to some of these shorter term groups that are more need or topic driven, boy, people are ready to jump in with both feet and really engage. And, a couple of times I've been in groups where I go, I'm not sure I would have said that way, but now that you have, let's move forward.